Great. Then I wish you a good webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. So good day, everyone. So thank you for coming for the ICUDBR hosted webinar. So I'm Veronica Felipe, and with me is my colleagues Jayvee Aquino and Dr. Maria Isabel Melgar, and we're going to discuss to you the processes that we did for the UTC academic adaptation and online pilot training. So maybe Jayvee and Dr. Bell, can you just like say hi for a moment before we begin?
Sure. Good day, everyone, and well, we're excited to share our experience on this UTC conversion to online program. Okay, we'll let Jayvee also introduce himself.
Okay, so good evening, good morning, and good afternoon for people across the globe. So I hope you enjoy our webinar. So this is our presentation, how we did our online pilot training for the UTC. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just to give you a brief background of what we did. So this is actually documenting the processes of UTC adaptation. So it's supposed to be a Philippine adaptation, which would follow the traditional setting of face-to-face delivery. But because we were forced to adapt, all of us last year, so it also changed into pilot online training. So as you are aware of, when we talked about the universal treatment curriculum, it's one of the most comprehensive training manuals meant to build the capacity of service providers in the field of substance use disorders treatment. The UTC was developed primarily for people who might not have the sufficient particular training for addiction, for substance use disorders, or for those people who might not have the sufficient educational background. So the goal of UTC is basically to address the dearth of professionals working in the field. So it's as one of the most comprehensive training courses, so it's also one of the most intensive. The basic series consists of 8 courses, which totals to about 188 training hours. So if you do it every day for continuously, so it's about 2 months training. So initially, the modality of UTC training is through intensive face-to-face training. However, as we progress, as the international organizations who implement the training program, they realize that there are some people who actually don't need the intensive face-to-face training, and that's when the walkthrough was developed. The walkthrough modality was particularly done for college professors, for guidance counselors, and for those who are actually in the academy providing not services to SUD, but as ICUDBR, it's aligned with their goal that it's the people in the academy that actually lobby for the accreditation and acknowledgement of certain professions in majority of the country. So how did the Philippine adaptation happen? So in the Philippines, so we actually hosted 3 university walkthrough training. So this is hosted by Ateneo de Manila University, the College of St. Emil de La Salle, and the University of Santo Tomas. So this consists of 10 training days with a 1-day break after 6 consecutive sessions. So there were 77 participants from 19 universities and 4 government agencies, which included the Professional Regulatory Commission and accredited professional organizations. Now, it's very important for us in the Philippines because the Professional Regulatory Commission is the one that gives certification for certain professionals to be able to practice, like nurses, psychologists, counselors, doctors. So we have we have a board exam, which is basically the nationally accreditation process. So their participation was important because they are also the one that advocates for recognition of a multidisciplinary field in substance use disorder. So, majority of the evaluation feedback says that there is a request for more casework and tools that can be used in the academic setting. There is a plateau of learning after a certain day because in a walkthrough training, we condense the 2 month, the 188 hours into about an 80-hour training. So it was an overload of information for some, and then there's a time constraint as well as increase in weekdays. So these were the recommendations of the 77 participants for the three Philippine adaptation from the three university walkthroughs. So that the walkthrough trainings were conducted in 2017 and 2018, and then in 2019, so we did a one-day focus group discussion. So the objective is the UTC integration into the academy. So it was hosted by both of our activities were hosted by the College of St. Ignace, in which there were psychologists and guidance counselors, and from the accredited professional organization representing 6 universities, in which we did a review of the 8 courses. So the objectives of the FGB is to share their walkthrough experiences, the feedback on the usefulness of courses and its applicability to university settings, and assess the need for development of local cases and exercises for localization. So there was also a recommendation change for country adaptation. So the initial one-day meeting was basically an overview, a sharing of experiences, and what can we do to make the UTC ours. So what can we do to make it suited for the Philippines? So the recommendations for that one-day training is to be able to address the redundancy, streamline the topic, add local data and cases, and integrate existing laws and regulations that are relevant to the FUB treatment, as well as school policy. So that was January. After 3 months, we met again. So we did a 2-day module by module review. So it's basically a course by course and a module by module intensive course analysis. So the objective is to prepare the UTC for integration to behavioral science courses and existing school guidance programs. So we actually have 2 objectives. One is that how can we teach and disseminate UTC to our students, whether it's an undergrad subject or a diploma course or a master's degree program. But at the same time, we wanted to be able to provide actual skills and training to address the needs of guidance counselors and student affairs who may encounter students who are starting to use substances. Okay. So each course was assigned to 16 participants as a paired work, and so as I mentioned earlier, so the modality is still a traditional classroom setting. So we estimated the course duration to about 70 to 80 hours with all the changes and revision. So this is an example of our output. So this is just a general overview. So for UTC1, Physiology and Pharmacology for Addiction Professionals. So let's say, for example, the Module 1 was recommended for modification. So there must be an introduction on global statistics, highlight floating data such as prevalence, treatment statistics, incarceration, HIV, among others. Then we also talked about retaining Module 2, adding street names of like the substances that are familiar in the Philippines. We deleted Module 4 and moved it into a different course. So this is the module on stigma and family. So we modified Module 3 and Module 5 to delete the redundant slides and rearrange the sequence of presentation. So these are one example of our output. So another example is for UTC4, basic counseling skills. We talked about Module 2 to modify and combine issues in counseling practice such as self-disclosure, relationship boundaries, dual relationship, transference, and counter-transference. We talked about modifying core counseling skills and psychoeducation to include basic principles in working with clients, as well as to merge topics around criteria for an effective psychoeducation and preparing for psychoeducation to be merged with module 7. So this is the example of our two-day output. Doc Bell, you want us to add something?
I think I can do that during my part when we do
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So so after this session, so we have we created a proposal and submitted it to ICU-DBR. So in that case, the pilot training approved proposal was, the objective is basically to refine the materials in terms of content, structure, and delivery while retaining the original course sequence. So supposedly it's supposed to be a partnership wherein we will use the Colombo Plan, the U.S. Embassy Manila Colombo Plan project, in which there would be a material and then it will be delivered. So that was the original proposal approved by ICU-DBR. So the partner university is Ateneo de Davao University, and we have a very clear particular audience in mind. So we were gonna be conducting the training for site faculty, for MA students, and guidance counselors from Mindanao. So the target date of that was April 2020. Okay, before I turn you over to Dr. Melgar, so but what happened is that, so it was supposed to be in April 2020, but in March 15, so the Philippines was, NCR was put under enhanced community quarantine, in which we were in a lockdown. So because of COVID, so there would be a change in terms of the modality because the face-to-face training is no longer possible. So and that's when we retained our partner university and then moved the date to a later date, in which my colleague, Dr. Melgar, will discuss to you about the processes of the revisions and adaptation.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So next slide, please, Verna. Okay, you know, Verna explained it with a cool demeanor, but the process was a nightmare when the lockdown, okay, hit on us. So that means we have in terms of administrative and technical changes that we have to make. It was really nerve-wracking, and Ken Taylor, who was a trainer himself, he said that converting in person to a virtual format is more than transferring content to a PowerPoint presentation, which is so true. And the next slide will tell us, okay, what happened, in terms of the process, is that we have to imagine how to use the internet, for instance, how to use the platform, and that was going to be my first time, okay, to use Zoom, for instance, and it took a lot of course, brainstorming, researching, and boldness in terms of, okay, how am I going to present this, or how is the team going to collaborate on a discussion of a topic? So the process is intense, and it was something that we were excited about. So the energy and emotionality is high. Alongside with it is the administrative arrangement, which became like a good news in itself. Later on, I will discuss what is that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, what made it a complex, complicated exercise? This business of adapting, okay, an existing UTC curriculum, because we have a rich material, and when you're in front of that rich material, you wish you could share it all. Okay? But we cannot do that. We only have a few hours of sharing with the participants. And let's say for a particular topic, I can only have, let's say, on the average, three 1.5 hour sessions. So that itself, 1.5 hour session, if you will compare that with an 8 hour session on a typical in-person, okay, discussion, you know, that's peanuts. So that is the one that's it's a big struggle for the team. And then we have the PowerPoint slides, all right? So that itself, arranging, okay, this one comes first because we're not doing this topic, and it's a kind of, in other words, it's a confusion in itself, because my tendency was to work on the original slides. I think it would have been easier if I made my own slides. That's working around what ideas I have in mind. But this time adapting what is there is a challenge. Okay. All the others, like cases and exercises, I have to read all of them. Okay, how do we adapt this? How do we make it relevant? What names do we change? Venues, geographical locations, and the context in itself, So, oh my, I don't know with my teammates, but it was really a big load. And then lastly, all facilitators, we are experienced in doing an in-person training. We have a background in the UTC applications and all that, but the platform is different, So our day 1, day 2, day 3, we have to learn from that, from my colleagues on how she handled it, or from myself, how I weathered through this 1.5 hours, condensing all the things that I want to share. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think Verna has clearly explained this cutting down, chopping the 80 hours sessions to 33 hours. It's one third almost, okay, of the total number of hours. But there was something like, it's an accidental thing that we did. We split the curriculum to 2 parts, because we were also working around the schedule of professors who are in school, and also we thought that through feedback from the host university, we thought it is best to split it into 2 weeks in terms of the topics, cluster of topics. We thought that that should go together, and then have a 2-month break. That's a lot. Okay, we have to compromise to the availability of our participants who are from the academy. Okay, and the 2-month break is, I think that was a busy time for everybody. So we decided as a class to hold it 2 months after. And then we had another 2-week training. So, well, the nice thing that came out of this, hullabaloo was that we were able to get participants from all over the Philippines. Okay, one from this island, one from this city, and it was a great combination. It's a mix of people from islands from the south and islands from the north, and then combining them was I think for me it was a great interaction. I think we got very good, well experienced, and not exactly fresh students in themselves because they are so experienced in the field of drug addiction. So I think that's the good side of this platform. Okay, next slide, please. So, what were the questions that were burning in our minds when we started, from day zero to think about how we're going to condense this into 1.5 hours, okay? So what needs to be changed? I told you there's the UTC thick, very thick books, and so we went over it, okay? So, okay, the decision of what do we let go? What do we merge? What do we give up without feeling frustrated or guilty? And we have to think of the suggestions of the focus group discussion that came earlier, like last year. What new things do we have to put in? New things meaning data, situations that is very unique and relevant to us, to Philippines. And so that's the research that we have to do. Next slide, please. Now, it is not easy in itself because we have to also be considerate of the local context of the academe. In other words, the Philippine university and faculty. We have to identify with them their critical role in the prevention and even to some extent to the treatment, okay, of people who are struggling with addiction. And the student population, there's a quite a sizable percentage who are vulnerable or who are of high risk to drug addiction. And so our audience saw that, okay? So they got engaged. And now the problem, of course, is the virtual format. And we have been very successful in engaging the older, more experienced faculty who joined us. And I think they got it immediately in terms of, you know what I mean, when we say that, you know what we mean. And they would say, they would nod. And in terms of content, I know we have to expand some ideas, but we were limited by the length of time available. Now, if I was a participant in the walkthrough seminar of UTC at the Ateneo, and I went through an experience that was vibrant, and you learn a lot from people in the classroom. You relate well with them. You ask questions. So the learning experience is so alive, and I think that's what I miss when we did the virtual format. Maybe I myself have to learn more about how to enhance the impact of the learning experience on Zoom, because we use Zoom. Okay, next slide, please. And this is what I mean. When we did the virtual format, oh my God, I was facing all these still pictures. And I think there were about over 20 who attended. And only about 2 or 3 people were brave enough to open their videos, and as if I have only 3 people in the classroom, And there's no movement. You see, I can't hear voices. I can't, people might be laughing, and you don't get that kind of sensual stimulation. And that's the most frustrating, actually. I don't mind about dressing up or in shorts and that's not an issue for me and nor for the team. So, but then as a teacher, I can't use a whiteboard. I mean, that's different. It's a different experience. So, nor can we have a manila paper for group discussions and all that. During coffee break, which we call it, like a 5-minute toilet break, nobody, we don't talk to each other. And then the group discussion. Oh boy, we have to be contented with no or minimal group discussions. Next slide, please. So at first I was, Verna was telling me about the synchronous and the asynchronous method, and that was the first time I heard of the term asynchronous. So I had to learn it myself. Okay, so when I did, the next question is, how do you balance it? And I was worried about my own asynchronous case sessions, like giving them cases, and I think the participants did not have enough time to look into the exercises that we gave them. And that's a challenge for us, for those who will be doing a virtual format. Okay. The next one is a PowerPoint. I can't create fancy slides, so we have to get this college student who helped us with it. And he was fantastic. Oh my God, he was really fantastic. So I said, okay, if I can't do much of group discussion or interaction, I think I should have a PowerPoint that is visually stimulating. And that's my first level of satisfaction. Next slide, please. Okay, the process takes a lot of integration, as it's that I said here, because you condense the voluminous content into engaging and, of course, digestible format. Okay? I think the structure, the time structure, took care of that. Okay? We have to be succinct and we have to be more direct in our discussion. But I have to say less on elaboration of certain points. No, so I have to prioritize. Okay, which topics should I discuss more, and which topics? Okay, I can say it in passing. Next slide, please. All right, I'm saying this emphatically. Okay, we have to review, repeatedly the syllabus. We have to meet. Like, I don't know how many times we were meeting by Zoom, and then we have to revise after the meeting, revise the content, and we have to ask these questions. All right, is this something that's relevant, that deserves a place in the 1.5 hour presentation? And then we have to rewrite of course, not only the cases, materials, but our PowerPoint. And during the presentation itself, we have to listen hard. Okay, I listened hard to Verna. I listened hard to Jayvee, just so I can say that, all right, I think the transition is good, and I'm more confident with my content. So those are the condensing challenges. Next slide. Adjusting the learning experience and increasing the impact. I must say this is something that we have to work on. I myself, I have to work on it. Like, how do I create small group discussions using the Zoom? Okay, that's one. Okay, and there are other numerous questions that I have, and so because my goal, our goal is really to make the learning experience have an impact on our outcomes, okay, of this particular platform. Next slide, please. And so, 2020, for those of you who have used it, congratulations. 2020 means after 20 minutes, okay, you pause with the class. Pause and then look out of your window, look at an object, a tree or something, a bird or what, that is 20 feet away, okay, and do that for 20 seconds. This is to rest the eyes. And guess what? It's always on my PowerPoint slide, but I was never able to use it. So I wish I could use it. Like after 20 minutes, oh my God, I haven't even discussed anything else yet. And I'm already I have to stop for 20 seconds, after 20 minutes. So that's a lesson. Okay, next slide, please. And I think this is the presentation of the implementation.
So, thank you, Dr. Bell. So I guess it's my turn again. So Dr. Bell was saying like how we have met, I think for the initial process, like there's about like 3 months of initial meeting. But then for the rewriting, it's basically, until the day that, until October. So what we did for ICU-DDR is because we need a copy. So they are linked into our Google Drive because we make changes according to the recommendations of participants also. So how's the online training implementation? So the online training implementation wasn't as tedious and as challenging as the process of the actual adaptation, I would say, of the actual rewriting of the course manual. So for one, it was because we are very intentional in our selection of our activities because we have a clear particular audience in mind. So we know that our audience are someone who knows, when we talk about counseling theories, they know it very well. Okay. They would know about stigma. They would have basic concepts. They would be familiar with what crisis is about. They would definitely know what ethics is about because we are not only governed by the ethics of our profession, but also of our own university policies. So, but we know that we have to give them knowledge and skills that can be used, that's FUD specific. Like how do we, they know what FUD is about, they would know about what are the diagnostic criteria, but how does it translate into what's the understanding of FUD as a disease? Or how can we give actual tools to guidance counselor in terms of screening? Okay, how can we advocate for the Office of Student Affairs not to kick out students who are caught using substances, but to actually refer them to a treatment? So that's something that's very clear on our mind. So we're very intentional in the selection of our materials. So for the training session, so Dr. Melgar talked about, so we did a 33 hours of synchronous session. So these are 11 meetings at 1.5 hours. So that's ideally our session is about 1.5 hours per meeting, but in reality we normally exceed time. So like we don't finish 1.5 hours, but we don't exceed up to 2 hours. So like maybe like about 10 or 15 minutes at a certain given day. So for the first part, so our training was also not sequential. It's not UTC 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So, but rather it's according to topic. So let's say, for example, so we start with the foundation, which is the physiology and pharmacology of addiction. Then we follow with an introduction for treatment, because for the continuum of care, there is an introduction to case study and screening. So somewhere along that, before we move to evidence-based practices, we talked about case management, which is UTC 6, and then we talked about screening, intake and assessment, which is part of UTC 5, and then we go back to evidence-based practices. So that's our the training that we did in July, and then in October, we talked about co-occurring disorders, we talked about counseling, we talked about crisis intervention, and then we talked a little bit about it. So the part one only has a 5 hours credited asynchronous session. We give a lot of supplemental materials, but the asynchronous session only pertains to the credit hours that we award to our participants if they did a particular task. So, but in part two, there's about 10 hours of asynchronous session. So the duration for the first part for July is 3 weeks with 1 week in between. So basically, we did a 5 day straight training. So actually, we start on a Friday always for like an orientation or refresher. So and then 2 day break, and then we start 5 days, and then there's a 1 week in between, and then another 5 days. But during the focus group discussion, they were saying that some of them have difficulty doing the synchronous session because they're working from home, they have other obligations, and a 5 days seems to be like an everyday training seems to be too much. So we incorporated their recommendations into our October training. So we immediately changed it based on their recommendation because we did not only conduct an evaluation that's online, but we actually did a focus group discussion. So for part two, what we did is the training is now in a 1 month course, wherein we started with one Friday for the orientation and refresher, and then we did 3 days training, and then a 2 day break, and then a 3 days training, and then a 2 day break, and so on and so forth. So that's for the second part of the training program. So what are the learning platforms that we use? So in partnership with Ateneo de Davao, which is our co-host university, so we use the Google Classroom for sharing of information, making announcements, sharing supplemental materials. So we also, with the permission of ICU PDF, the slides that we edited were converted into PDF and uploaded into Google Classroom. But aside from that, we always give them additional references and reading materials to other important or relevant information, particularly for that subject. So Kahoot was our friend in terms of breaking the monotony, providing activities in class, as well as conducting the pre-test and post-test. So, but definitely there's a lot of room for improvement in our methodology, okay, and in our activities. And then we use Zoom, which is very user-friendly. So it allows for polls, like if we ask questions, it also allows for a breakout session. And I think that in the Philippines, most Filipinos are familiar with Zoom. But it is not without a challenge, and JV will discuss that. But basically, these are the learning platforms that we use for the online training. So what were the teaching methods that we use? So we use case studies, so which is normal and found in UTC. But the difference is that we, the trainers, the three of us, created case studies, like that is what's really happening in the Philippines. Then we use, of course, direct instruction. We use educational videos because there are particular topics in which, so we can do activities. Like, for example, in the brain, how can they actually understand what's the effect of, let's say, methamphetamine or any other psychoactive substances in the neurotransmitters? So we search for educational videos that could supplement the activities. We have game-based learning. So it's also effective, and the range of our participants are actually from young, like mid-20s, to we have our oldest participant is about 70 years old. So and it works for that wide age range. Okay, so we also invited guest speakers, like particularly to talk about HIV. We talked about one significant session that we did was when we humanize what a person in recovery is about. So we invited a person in recovery to share his experiences. We invited doctors who talked about HIV, and then we also invited someone from our infectious diseases in the Philippines. And it was also a good opportunity for us to learn, but also to realize the gap So we found out that for RITM, which is the Tropical and Infectious Diseases in the Philippines, they handle HIV, but they don't conduct screening for substance use disorder because they were not trained to do so. So that's something that can easily be done for doctors. So we also have inquiry-based learning. So we, of course, these are adult learners. We ask questions, we draw from their experiences, we encourage them to share. So we did quizzes. Okay, so our quizzes are actually like through Kahoot. So we still gave quizzes and post tests, but not in the 33-hour period. So the quizzes they can take at any of their given time because it can be open. And the beauty of the technology approach is that you could actually you can't cheat. So it's there's a time frame given, and then you can't go back to the question. Okay, so normally like we give a 60 seconds, like for most questions they can answer it in 1 second, in 1 minute. Sorry. There's a reflective discussion and of course a supplemental reading and assignment. So this, I want to share with you an example of a case study because the adaptation of UTC, I don't think that this is the first time that people are trying to do adaptation. So as in my previous work, so I'm familiar with what's been done. But mostly when they do adaptation, it's translation or changing the names to culturally appropriate names. But in our case, we actually put actual cases that's happening in the Philippines. As I said, like how can we make it relevant and useful to our audience, to our participants? So this is one example of a case study. So this is an abridged version. So Ali is a 30-year-old male from Marawi City in Lanao del Sur. He is a second child from 6 siblings. His first exposure to drugs was marijuana and alcohol at the age of 14. He immediately enjoyed the effects of substances that he was using. He didn't do well in high school and got kicked from one school to another. At the age of 17, his parents separated, which left him devastated and feeling like falling into darkness. He sees no point in living. He involved himself in criminal activities such as carnapping, robbery, and burglary, not because he needed the money, but because he is angry with his family. Alcohol is strictly prohibited in his community based on their Muslim beliefs. That's a bit wrong for those who are not familiar. However, he mentioned meth or shabu could be found all over the place and seen as an open secret among the community. He felt his meth use was justified, thinking it was not against his beliefs. And as the drug abuse prolonged, he lost a lot of weight. He wore 3 shirts, thinking he can cover up the physical deterioration by looking a bit bigger. So this is one example of case study that we incorporated. And we prepared 9 case studies that can be used for any other courses. We also prepared guide questions for each courses in which they can select the case study that they can use. Okay, so these are our guest speakers. So we have medical doctors, a person in recovery, and a treatment center coordinator. So we have Dr. Melgar. Sorry, you have to help me. I forgot the names of our doctors. Dr. Tan I. Am I correct?
We have Mao, Dr. Mao. Sorry, I forgot her family name. And then we have Taktakan, Dr. Taktakan.
Okay.
And
Yeah. So,
yeah, I forgot the name of our guest from the treatment center.
the treatment center coordinator, Jayvee would know the name.
That was Sir Erwin Lingad, the nurse of the DOH-TRC of Cagayan de Oro.
Okay, so thank you very much. So what were our purpose in inviting them? So for the treatment, I mentioned already the person in recovery. The treatment center coordinator is that our participants are not FUD service providers, direct providers, right? So we let them know, like when we talked about the continuum of care, how does it translate into practice? And also, aside from that, we wanted them to actually know where they can run to, like in referral centers. So in which we gave an assignment in case management that they have to create their database. So this is like getting to know your community. Okay. And then for the medical doctors, so we have one that talks about HIV and how he started and provided services for a person deprived of liberty, particularly in Cebu. And Cebu is a particular place of interest in the Philippines because that is the drug of choice of Filipinos are methamphetamine hydrochloride, which is commonly known as shabu. But Cebu has a high concentration of people who are injecting drug users. Okay. So the rate of HIV from IDUs are quite high. Okay. And then we have Dr. Mao who's working for the RITM, and that's where we found out that they don't conduct screening, which is like an 8 question, like a 5 minute talk to patients with HIV. So we also did an educational video. We selected brain and methamphetamine because that's particularly relevant to our context. We wanted to show you the video, but the platform, WebEx training does not allow it. But we can share the PDF of the PowerPoint to you so you could watch it at your own pace. So you can see what we have incorporated. There were actually several videos, like several case studies and several different methodologies that we try to incorporate to still make the online training as interactive as possible. Okay. So this is another example of localized adaptation. So we have so the Department of Health and the Dangerous Drugs Board of the Philippines actually created the client flow chart, which tells us in what stage are you supposed to give intervention or what to conduct, how to conduct screening. So I think it's quite small, probably in your screen, in your monitors, but there is talk about screening intake tools such as ASSIST, which we taught to our guidance counselors, to our psych faculty, so that they can conduct it. We also incorporated what are the school policies. I know that the treatment standards for that's recommended by UNODC that discourage from mandatory drug testing. But drug testing is actually allowed in the Philippines under our policies and our law. So we actually included the policy so that our participants are aware because these are the regulations that govern their practice. So those are the changes that we did for the actual online training. So for the adaptation course. So I'll turn you now over to Jayvee for the challenges.
Okay, so we understand the learning approach of UTC and how to implement it in an online setting. The process is well by our two facilitators. So if you have been teaching UTC face-to-face or live, so we know or we understand that the course relies heavily on collaborative exercises and learner-directed activities. So you put those elements together and translate that in an online platform. Okay, so the task that we had was exciting and we experienced a lot of hiccups along the way, but we managed to adapt to situations and circumstances. These are the challenges that we faced during our training, the first part of our training last July and October 2020. Okay, first is the internet connection. So even though our participants are coming in from major cities in the Philippines, at least 2 out of 10 participants are experiencing poor internet connections, especially during the typhoon season. So we experienced that in October, okay, during our second part. So as you know, Philippines is part of the typhoon belt because we are in the Pacific. So we experience typhoon at least 20 times a year. Number 2, it's problems with technology. Okay, so when we are migrating in online, Okay, so like what Dr. Bell has said, so ano, um, from installation of the application and then from submitting to the requirements and even downloading the application is a challenge to some of the participants and also including us. The third would be selecting essential topics that will fit into the tight schedule of the participants. So let's say, for example, course 5. So we know that this course is an intensive course. So it should be taught 33 hours. So in an online platform or in online format, it has reduced to 80%. So we have to select topics for the participants. And what we did is that we supplemented resources, okay, materials, and it was distributed after class. Number 4, our pace is quite fast for beginners or young learners. We have to understand they have to take time or time to process information, and if you can, okay, you have to lengthen the session to avoid to just breezing through the topic. And because of limited time, some parts of the curriculum, like interventions, need more in-depth discussion. Okay, I think we did that in the second part, so we have more intensive discussion, so that's why we exceeded the allotted time of 1.5 hours. 6, how to make the lectures interactive. So we, as what Ma'am Bernab said, so we invited people in recovery, okay, and we use applications for icebreakers, and of course, we use videos for our samples. Number 7, participants are mentally exhausted on the successive training days. So this was in our first part of the training. So we have, I think, one straight week for training. So we realized that the participants are exhausted. So during the second part, we have to hit the pause button in every module, okay, so to give them time to process the information. In my realization, so we can improve many areas in our training. So we usually break down the activities that we conducted after lecture. So we take notes on our best practices and of course the things we can improve. So these are learnings during our training. Oops, okay. So we created a network of professionals that adds value to the addiction field here in the Philippines. So the online learning provided opportunity for massive regional participation. So this is impossible if you do this in a traditional way in face-to-face training setup. Yes, we became efficient on what we have, okay? So let's say, for example, in our chat box, so if I'm co-facilitating, I will always man the chat box and then check for questions and inquiries. And if I can answer the question, so I will just answer the questions immediately. And then if there are things or there are concerns and questions that needs to be discussed in the group, so I will just call the attention of the lecturer. Okay, so it's really refreshing to see faces during the discussion. So utilizing videos during session improves interaction. Okay. And of course, you really have to understand the platforms that you are using. So just like the other trainers, it's my first time to use Google Classroom. It's my first time to use Zoom. So I really enjoy the process of learning the in and outs of the platforms. So life stories as resources. So we know that it's effective and valuable, but it really takes time. Okay, it really needs time. So it really needs time for discussion and then question and answer. So what we did is that we exceeded the allotted time for this. And yes, of course, I have to say that we have a good working dynamics and became better as we go along. So the presence of three facilitators during the entire program was much appreciated. Do you want to add something on this, guys? Ma'am Verna and Doc Bell?
You know, there are two women in the team. And you always provide stabilizing factor in our team, and I think I like that. You know, of course, the age difference is also a very good mix.
Okay. And we also like bring like different like field of experience, and it was I think that it's an because and it also helps that even from the beginning we are in constant communication. So when Dr. Melgar was saying that on the process of revision we meet, like there was a point that we meet like once every week to see and check our progress, or like what can we do, or is this the way that we should do it, and like edit. And even like during the during the training, so after FGD, we still meet and discuss. So it's a constant process. So it was actually the content development which was more challenging. Plus the technology we learned to adapt, but like as Jayvee mentioned, so it was a wrong idea to actually do it on October, the online training, because of the typhoon season. So there was a time wherein like there's only 2 trainers because like we can't really join.
There was the time that we had a blackout because of the typhoon, remember? Yeah, blackout.
Yeah. One of our participants, they were actually experiencing flood during the training, and she was saying like during the training the water house. That was one of our learnings as well.
Okay, I think it's my turn.
Yep.
The recommendations for adapting a UTC curriculum to an online platform. There's a lot of recommendations really have to do with with the process of converting what used to be an in-person program to an online platform. And then 2, adjusting yourself as a facilitator on the platform itself, you know, how you look on screen. I mean, you have to also worry about that. What's your background? What's the dress that you're going to wear? How animated do you want to be in order to reach them? And certainly there were things that we learned and that we want to pass on, and not because we have gained wisdom on this experience, but because we recognize what could be the challenges and our flaws and how we can correct them and improve the future. And so I talked about, you know, converting it from in-person training program to something that is internet-based. And then you also have to think about your participants, because these people are from the university, and much of the UTC content is for information, but we also want to engage them, that there is a role for them. And the role could be, they could be an advocate, or they can do screening in their universities. And that is something that they like to discuss. And of course, the facilitation factor is still there. But, the real challenge and what we learned is that we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to shorten a particular content to fit a virtual time frame, there should be a lot of serious decision making on this, because we know what they're going to miss. And what I want to share is, we think this is what is needed to know. Okay, and that is a matter of like prioritizing. So what would be synchronous and what would be asynchronous. And we must also think that the asynchronous activity is really suited for an adult learner. Like we leave it up to the adult learner to take advantage of the resources. So that one is, maybe it's not true for everyone else, but at least for, I hope, for the majority of professionals who are there. They're not just faculty, they're also registered psychologists, registered guidance counselor. So that's how we think it can benefit them, the asynchronous activities. And then, as always, it's the facilitation technique on the platform that seems to, for me, it's a learning experience. Like, keep it to 1.5 hours. You can extend for maybe another 15 minutes. So keeping time is very important. Of course, you have to be familiar with the technology. And then how you transition from your own end to the next speaker. It's good that all of the three of us are there, so that when I'm faster than I thought I planned that it wouldn't, but it did, I was fast. And so it's the turn of the next person to discuss his topic. And so that's the advantage of all of us being there every day. Okay. Next slide, please. So for me, a second pair of techie hands would be beneficial. Okay. And, I'm the least techie person in the team. And I thought that I have more confidence if these two are there, like Vernon's very techie, and also Jayvee. So that's it, I'm in good hands. Then be prepared to flex, fix problem in the moment, black out. What do we do? I couldn't, like for me personally, there was one time that I couldn't join them because of internet connectivity. So it was a very stressful day for me because, I have to be there to really to be on time and to finish on time. So the delay was stressful. Okay, when I couldn't get in immediately. Now the thing is, if you look stressful, people in the classroom would see you stressed, and that of course is not very good. As I said it here, it could interfere with your own facilitation and the learning of the class. Be bold in the use of meaningful games. We started with Kahoot because that's the budget that can allow us. We cannot be experimenting with others. Okay, I think some of them here are free, but some are actually more expensive than Kahoot. Next slide, please. I think the mitigating the virtual fatigue, that's something that we have to appeal to our audience in terms of be patient to share or to block off your 1.5 hours with us. It's going to be intense, compact, and all that. And we're trying to do a break That's why I love hearing people from the audience giving their comments, ideas, experiences, but that's not every day. You see, Filipinos are kind of not, they're not, they're quite shy, in a public venue, even like this. That's why I was struck by the fact that they were using the chat box, and the chat box suited the culture of our Filipino students. They would write, but they won't show their face. So that's something else. Then, of course, the break was, it's like a semester break. And then the evaluation was also terrific. We learned a lot from the FGDs. And then we have, there was a refresher course. Because we had a break of 2 months, we decided to, on day 1 of part 2, we will do a refresher. And we didn't expect it, that they appreciated it the second time around. The reason why we did it, because there were new students who registered, and I said it's just fair that they should be getting the essentials of part 1. And then again, the break, the decision, okay, what do we do? We'll have a gap of 1 to 2 days, okay? And we did that for part 2, so people can have time to probably to absorb what they have listened to, and also be involved in the asynchronous exercises. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our story. We're ending it. I'm sure it's not the end of it, but we would love to hear your story, your own webinar style, type of audience that you have to deal with, your own team, the outcomes that you want to aim for, and the platform that you use outside of the Zoom. So I hope we can hear from you in July during the ICU DDR conference. Thank you. Salamat po.
Okay, I guess that's the end of our presentation.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Carrie!
Hi. Olivia and I switched bodies. So I got to hear the last bit here, and it was so interesting, and I've learned a lot. Thank you all to our excellent presenters for your work, what you've been doing, as well as for sharing it with us. We do have quite a few people on the call or on your training, so let's open up to maybe, as Isabel said, if people are more comfortable with the chat, that's fine. Or if people want to unmute, they can do so and ask a question at this time. And I'll pull up the chat so I can watch.
I think there's one question earlier. Yeah, by Francis. I think he was asking what are the examples of evidence-based practices you mentioned during our presentation?
I don't see the question, but is it something one of you is able to answer?
I think because this is part of my discussion, I'll answer this. So we basically discussed what's actually written in the UTC, but instead of focusing on, let's say, for example, like explaining what it is, because our audience already know it. So we talked about, the usual. So cognitive behavioral therapy, we talked about motivational healing, motivational enhancement therapy, we talked about family therapy, grief couples therapy, what am I forgetting? So all of the evidence-based practices, we briefly talked about pharmacotherapy, mainly because we can only use antabuse in the Philippines, and the rest are either not available or majority is not relevant because we're not an opioid consuming country, we're a meth consuming country. So all of this has were discussed, but instead of focusing on explaining what it is, so because we already know it, we just talked about how is it used in SUV. What is it particular use for? So or how in which particular cases like could it work? So those were the topics that were discussed. So I hope that answers your questions, Sir Francis.
Thank you so much. We have some really nice comments about your presentation. Just impressed with the presentation and all the efforts you put in. And yes, absolutely. And also a comment about how helpful this will be to others. So thank you for that. You guys really must have been comprehensive and amazing because people don't seem to have questions. You pre-answered all the questions. So how do you, maybe this is something you can talk to a little bit, and Isabel, you kind of hit on it, but how do you get over that initial fear that you're going to try something new with technology and it's not going to go well, and maybe you're going to look foolish, or you're going to have to scrap it and be flexible and do something else? How do you kind of handle that?
Can you hear me? I lost the screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's you know, the typical mode for responding to stress. It's fight or flight.
Yes.
We did a lot of fighting. With of course, if you're a group, you're braver, and you were working with the team, and we were. I think it just gelled. I mean, this is my first time to work with, I think, with Verna and Jayvee, but Verna, you know, we're colleagues and we see each other, etc. But we never really worked together. And so with Jayvee was introduced to me by Verna, and that's it. We have to roll our sleeves and get on, you know. I think the urgency also helped. We have to produce this within 2 months. Okay, so that's stuck in our minds. Okay, we have to finish an output. Yeah.
And I think, you know, you also raised a really important point, which is feeling like you're not doing it all on your own, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need a lot of social support. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I know even if I'm with someone who doesn't know what they're doing and I don't know what I'm doing, I still feel a little bit more confident somehow.
And it's really helpful that we get to we are very supportive. I guess like if there are, let's say, I think I'll be like, I'm extending time for finishing early, or like, can you do it? And it's not even like people asking us to do, like we contribute, each of us contribute a different set of expertise, okay, or like a different contribution. But I guess, and I shared it with them, like it's with sometimes it's an online training that's very long, and you don't have your coach trainers with you. So it's kind of difficult because there are questions that would be raised that might be their specialization, and they can bring in something. Yeah, or like, and in a lot of cases, like when it comes to online training, we have a lot of us have limitations in terms of technology. Sometimes we get blocked. So if it's only one person, it's like you leave the class hanging. So for us, like being there all the time during the training really helps.
So Bill shared an interesting study would be to compare a certain group of post-test results from in-person training and online training, given the reduced hours when done online.
We have the data for the pre-test and post-test, but we have one challenge that we were thinking that it should be done the next time. So in Kahoot, you could do it like in a classic mode, team play mode, and a classic, or like you can do it, like they can do it at their own particular time. So I will open the test, like it's gonna be available for 3 days or 2 days. But sometimes what happens is that they are not able to take it because it's not within the class time. So we were saying that one of the learnings is maybe next time what we do is that, like, because on the last day of the training, what we do is to have a closing ceremony, a very Asian, I guess, and a very African thing as well, right? So the time for like maybe like 30 minutes that's supposed to be allotted for test is turned into this. But we also would have to say that our exams are actually much shorter. So I think it's about 20 to 30 items quiz. So like that's focus that's particularly relevant. So even if it's a 4 course, we only take the pre-test and post-test. And again, because aside, well, knowledge-wise, we know that they're there, they're faculty, like, they teach the same things we're teaching them, but we rather more focus on the application. Like, how can they use this in the school setting? How can they use it in the academy?
So we have a comment that from our friend Moses. That was a great presentation. There are similarities to what we experienced during the walkthrough for African universities. Kind of like you just alluded to, there are some similarities for sure.
So we were hoping that, Carrie, that we were thinking that maybe like for the ICU DDR training, we can do propose an FGD for those who did the walkthrough, because there's a lot of room for improvement for the adaptation, and maybe like with all our experiences, we could maybe like do a standardized UTC for the academy, right? So
yeah, I think that's a fabulous idea. We just completed a walkthrough in Uganda, and we used a different model where there was a lot put on those participants because they watched videos from the other African walkthrough on their own time, so they weren't interacting. And then we had what we called enrichment meetings, where we met after every 2 courses and answered questions and went over things with a really strong group of facilitators and professors. And there's pros and cons to that method too. So yeah, it would be interesting to discuss all the different ways people are doing it, and maybe come up with a way we want to do it, but maybe there needs to be flexibility in between, for different groups. There's pros and cons to standardizing or not, right? So I see the question, were the sessions recorded for the consumption of participants on a later time, especially since there was a mention where there were troubles with internet connection and the typhoon?
That's one thing that we didn't do because we did not ask for the permission of the participants to record the training. So, but in the question with regards to the assignments or homework, but every after session we upload the PDF file into the Google Classroom, and as well as the supplemental materials, so as well as the instructions for assignments and everything.
Yeah, it can be really nice. We record our sessions for most of our trainings, if we remember, and try to post them in case people, get thrown off of the call for whatever reason and can come back and look at it later. So, but you are right. There's I think a question that we're still figuring out. A lot of people are still figuring out about kind of consent or, need permission for that.
And some participants, like Dr. Melgar mentioned, that Filipinos tend to be shy. So, like, they will attend. No doubt they will attend, but they might not ask questions that they wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually the one that enriches the training process.
Yeah. Yeah, you would never want to make them feel, if that's kind of a way to make it less of a safe space and less of a comfortable space, then that you'd have to look at the pros and cons of that for sure.
Right.
Yeah, great. And let's see. Can there be a training for the online games? That's a great question.
Can we do this at the ICU DDR conference?
Yes,
I know tomorrow is the deadline, Carrie. I will do a proposal for us, so for the team.
Please, no, absolutely, let's do it. In fact, Susanna Henriks and I put in something that we want to do about just online, you know, you went to our problem solving group, so we want to talk about that. So maybe we can put it together.
Yeah, and I actually was the one that requested, like, maybe we can do an actual demo so that the participants can join. So, and then, you know, so, yeah. So because I would say that what we did for the second course, for the orientation, is that we showed them how to upload, like, in Google Classroom. Jayvee did an assignment course here.
Yeah.
Jayvee, explain what you did.
Okay, I just embraced the role of the researcher for technology.
All right.
And then I created a video on how to upload assignments, because that is one of our challenge during our first part of the training. I just made a video on how to upload. I just basically making videos on walkthrough and how to use technology. So just like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, you know, I had heard about the gamification of learning years and years before all of this happened. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, but, you know, I had gone to a conference with Kahoots when we actually were in person. And, you know, there's so many things out there. So if you guys can do something, please, you know, kidding aside, Verna, I would love for you to give us something for the conference. And I think that would be really helpful for everyone. Is Natalia who asked the question. And so Natalia will join us for sure.
Yeah, so.
And then Dr. Prapapoon also said that, you know, there's the concern about addiction to gaming as well, and behavioral addictions, which is certainly a concern.
I think there was actually a request for that, right, Dr. Bell, from our end, like they were saying that because the discussion is mainly on substance, and because these are college, you know, students, and behavioral addiction is such a part of it. But they were saying that because the focus is the universal treatment curriculum, this is the scope, there might be similarities, but maybe eventually it's going to be that way.
And certainly with the conference, we're not, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't have that, you know, we don't have to have a narrow scope, so. Yeah. All right, so any other questions or comments? I am so grateful for your work and for your presentation today. I know everyone really learned a lot, and you kept it interesting for us, and it sounds like there are some things people would like to see more of, so you're on the hook to teach us about how to do these games online and to do some participatory trainings for us, and I will definitely be there playing and learning with you as well. And for those of you who don't know me, since I came in late here, I'm Carrie Hopkins-Isles, and I'm the Deputy Director for ICU DDR. And thanks to Olivia Woodrow for starting us off today. And thank you to Verna and Isabel and Jayvee. And I look forward to working with you more in the future, hopefully in person at some point. And if you haven't checked out our website, icuddr.org, we have a lot of new things on there. So whether you've been there or not, please check it out. And we just had our ITTC launch yesterday, so there's a lot of new material. And we also want to encourage you to become individual members of ISUP at isup.net, isup.net. And if no one else has anything else, we will close out the session. Panelists want to say goodbye, say thank you.
Oh, right. Thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you to my great colleagues for the output. And thank you, Olivia, because we figured out how to work the PowerPoint.
She's amazing, yes. And again, a plug to how we need a whole village for technology, right? All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks, everyone.